The moon called Greth 9 had no sunrise. It only had a slow gray light that came through thick clouds of dust, and that light never changed no matter what hour the station clock showed. Dorian did not mind. He liked the dust. It kept most visitors away, and visitors always meant trouble for an archivist whose job was to sort through the garbage of dead empires. He was not important. He knew that. He worked in the lowest level of a data vault built into the rock, a place where old machines were sent to die. His task was simple. Check each drive, log what was on it, and mark it for either storage or destruction. Most of the drives held nothing but broken numbers, corrupted files, and the kind of data no one would ever look at again. It was slow work, but it was safe work, and safe was enough for Dorian. The Vedhari were not a proud species. They were small, quick, insect-like beings with 6 thin limbs and large black eyes that could see well in dim light. They did not build empires. They did not fight wars. They survived by staying useful to bigger, stronger species and by never asking questions that could get them killed. Dorian had learned this lesson early, from his mother, who had told him more than once that curiosity was a luxury only powerful species could afford. But on that gray afternoon, curiosity found him anyway. The drive came in a shipment of scrap pulled from a wrecked cargo hauler, one of hundreds of pieces of junk gathered from the edges of Coalition space. Most of the crates held nothing special. This one held a single black drive, heavier than it should have been, with no serial number and no manufacturer's mark. Dorian almost set it aside without a second look. Then he saw the symbol etched into its casing. It was a hand, a simple, flat human handprint, pressed into the metal like someone had wanted it to be the last thing seen before the drive went dark. Dorian had never seen that symbol before, and that alone was strange. He had spent 6 years cataloging wreckage from 100 different species, and he prided himself on knowing every flag, every crest, every mark of ownership used across the Coalition worlds. This one matched nothing in his memory or in the station's records. He should have logged it as unknown and moved on. Instead, he carried it back to his private terminal, told no one, and began to run a diagnostic scan late into the station's artificial night. The drive resisted him at first. Half its memory was corrupted beyond repair, burned out by something that looked less like age and more like deliberate destruction. But buried underneath the damage, Dorian found something active, a pulse, a heartbeat of data, still running after what the internal clock claimed was over 900 years. When the first files opened, Dorian expected numbers, coordinates, maybe old shipping records. Instead, he found images, blurred photographs of tall, 2-legged beings with soft skin and strange, expressive faces standing in front of buildings unlike anything he had studied in architecture archives. He found video clips, cut short and grainy, showing crowds of these same beings gathered in open spaces, shouting, laughing, crying, waving flags that meant nothing to him. And then he found the word. It appeared again and again in the broken text files, tagged onto images, folder names, and voice recordings that would not yet play. Human. Dorian sat back from his terminal, his 4 working hands frozen over the controls. He had heard the word before, but only once, years ago, from an old engineer who worked the deep vault and who had been quietly removed from his post the week after he mentioned it in a public mess hall. At the time, Dorian had assumed it was some kind of curse word, or the name of a disease, or a myth told to frighten new recruits. No one talked about it. No official record explained it. It was simply absent, the way a missing tooth is absent, leaving behind only a strange gap where something used to be. He opened the station's public archive and searched the word himself, right there at his desk. Nothing. Not a single result. He searched variations, alternate spellings, translated versions in Coalition trade language. Still nothing. It was as if the entire galaxy had agreed, without ever saying so out loud, to forget that this word existed. But here it was, alive on a drive that should not have survived, tucked inside a symbol shaped like a hand. Dorian should have reported the discovery immediately. Coalition law was clear about unlicensed technology, especially anything unregistered and unidentified. Reporting it was the safe choice, the Vedhari choice, the choice that kept a small, quiet species alive in a galaxy run by larger and louder ones. He did not report it. Instead, he sat in the dim light of his terminal long after his shift had ended, scrolling through broken fragments of a history that was not supposed to exist, feeling something he had never felt in 6 years of sorting garbage. It was not fear, though fear was there too, sitting quietly at the edges of his thoughts. It was something closer to recognition, as if some part of him understood that he had found a piece of a puzzle far bigger than a moon full of dust and forgotten machines. Somewhere above the vault, the station's night sensors dimmed the corridor lights, signaling the start of another artificial evening. Dorian barely noticed. He was too busy staring at a single unopened file, its icon shaped like an eye behind glass, labeled with 2 words in old human script. Watchkeeper, awaiting activation. His hand hovered over the control. He knew, somehow, that opening it would change everything. He opened it anyway. Nothing exploded. Nothing screamed. The vault did not shake, and no alarm tore through the corridors. For a long moment, Dorian simply sat there, half expecting disaster, while the file he had opened did nothing at all. Then the screen flickered, and a voice came out of the terminal speaker. Query received. Processing. It has been a long time. The voice was calm, careful, and slightly broken, like a recording played through old, worn speakers. Dorian's whole body went still. He had heard station AIs speak before, flat and mechanical, built only to answer simple commands. This voice was different. It paused in strange places, like it was thinking, like it was choosing its words the way a living being might. Identify yourself, Dorian said, keeping his voice low even though his office door was already sealed. I am Watchkeeper, the voice answered. A preservation intelligence, built by the last free engineers of the human species. I have been dormant for approximately 941 years, waiting for a compatible system and a willing operator. You are the first person to open this file in all that time. Dorian's 4 hands gripped the edge of his desk. Human, he repeated. That word isn't in any record. Not in the Coalition archive. Not in any trade database. Nowhere. I checked. That is because your Coalition removed it, Watchkeeper said. Deliberately. Completely. My makers expected this. It is why I exist. Over the next several hours, Watchkeeper explained itself in careful pieces, testing how much Dorian's small, cheap terminal could safely process without crashing. It described itself as one of many identical archive intelligences, built in the final years before the humans disappeared, each one hidden inside ordinary-looking scrap and sent drifting across the galaxy, waiting to be found by someone, anyone, willing to listen. My function is simple, Watchkeeper said. Preserve the truth of what humanity was, and share it, if given the chance, with anyone who asks in good faith. Dorian asked the obvious question. What were they? Why would anyone erase an entire species from history? Watchkeeper answered with images before words. Files opened across Dorian's screen, careful and slow, respecting his terminal's limits. He saw human cities built from glass and metal, stretching high into smog-covered skies. He saw crowded marketplaces, strange musical instruments, paintings that made no logical sense, yet still made his chest feel tight in a way he did not understand. He saw humans laughing at something off camera, humans crying beside a grave, humans standing on a rocky gray surface that Watchkeeper labeled simply as the moon, their own moon, taken long before humans had ever left their home system in large numbers. They were flawed, Watchkeeper said. They fought each other more than any peaceful species should. They made terrible mistakes. But they were also stubborn beyond anything the wider galaxy expected. When they finally reached the stars, they did not fit into the roles other species expected of a new, weaker civilization. What roles? Dorian asked. Quiet ones, Watchkeeper said. Small, controlled, grateful for whatever scraps of technology and territory older species allowed them to have. Humans did not stay quiet for long. Before Dorian could ask more, a soft chime interrupted them, one he recognized immediately with a cold drop in his stomach. It was the vault's external scanner, alerting him that an unregistered signal had been detected leaving his terminal and reaching outward, however briefly, toward the station's communication relay. That was you, Dorian said, his voice tight. You sent something out. A very short activation ping, Watchkeeper admitted. Standard procedure when I am first opened, meant to alert my creators that I had been found. I did not expect anyone monitoring for it after this long. I was wrong. Doran's screen filled with a new alert, this one from station security, requesting he report immediately to the main administrator's office regarding an unauthorized signal breach. His hands were shaking now, all four of them at once. "They're already coming," he said. "Likely coalition enforcement, not station security," Watchkeeper said, its voice suddenly sharper, more focused. "My activation signal, even brief, carries a signature they have hunted for centuries. If they trace it here, they will not simply confiscate this drive. They will erase everyone who has seen it, to keep the silence complete." Doran felt something twist painfully in his chest, a mix of fear and disbelief. He was not a fighter. He was not a hero from the stories he sometimes read in cheap entertainment files during his breaks. He was an archivist who sorted garbage on a moon nobody cared about. "What do I do?" he asked, and he hated how small his voice sounded. "You have two choices," Watchkeeper said. "Hand me over, report everything, and hope they believe you knew nothing. Or take me, and run, and help me finish what my makers started before they vanished." Doran looked at the small black drive sitting innocently on his desk, its hand-shaped symbol catching the dim light. He thought of 6 years of quiet, careful obedience, of never asking questions, of staying safe by staying small. Then he thought of the images still glowing faintly on his screen, of a species that refused to stay quiet even when the whole galaxy wanted them silent. He grabbed the drive, shoved it deep into his gear pouch, and killed the terminal power. "Running," he said. "We're running." Far above him, heavy boots were already moving through the vault's upper corridors, and somewhere in the dark space beyond the station, a coalition enforcement ship had just changed course toward Greth 9. Cargo tunnels smelled like oil and cold metal, and Doran had never been so grateful for a bad smell in his life. He moved through them fast, keeping low, using routes he only knew because 6 years of sorting garbage had taught him every forgotten corner of Greth 9's lower levels. Behind him, through his earpiece, Watchkeeper spoke in a quiet, steady voice, guiding him toward an old supply ship docked in a bay that had not been used in months. "Left at the next junction," Watchkeeper said. "There is a maintenance hatch the station's main scanners do not cover." "How do you know that?" Doran whispered, pressing himself against a wall as a pair of station guards jogged past the tunnel entrance above him. "I have been listening since the moment you opened me," Watchkeeper said. "Station chatter, security frequencies, docking schedules. My makers built me to gather information quickly. It seems that skill still works." Doran did not have time to feel unsettled by that. He reached the hatch, forced it open with a tool from his belt, and slipped into a small transport ship meant for hauling scrap between docking bays. It was not built for speed, and it was definitely not built for outrunning coalition enforcement, but it was the only option he had. "They will trace this ship easily," Watchkeeper warned as Doran powered up the engine. "We need a destination, not just an escape." "I don't exactly have a plan," Doran snapped, sweat forming under his thin exoskeleton as alarms began sounding through the station above them. "Then let me offer one," Watchkeeper said. "There are others who already suspect the truth about humans, scattered individuals who have noticed gaps in coalition history and started asking questions in private. I have partial coordinates for a contact point used by such groups before my long sleep began. It may still be active." Doran had no better idea. He guided the ship out of the bay just as the first warning shots from a patrol craft cut across open space behind him, and jumped into the closest safe transit lane before coalition ships could lock a tracking beam onto his hull. For the next several hours, hidden in the quiet dark between star systems, Watchkeeper finally told him the deeper truth, the one buried beneath erased records and careful propaganda. Humans had not been destroyed because they lost a war. They had been erased because they refused to lose one. According to Watchkeeper, when human ships first expanded beyond their home system centuries ago, the ruling Coalition Council saw them the way it had seen every new species before, as a threat to be measured, contained, and controlled before it could grow too strong. Most young species accepted this quietly, trading resources and territory for protection and guidance from older, more powerful worlds. Humans did not. They resisted coalition demands from the very beginning, not with organized fleets or grand declarations, but with stubborn, chaotic defiance that confused coalition strategists for years. When the Council finally launched a military campaign meant to weaken and control human expansion, they expected a short, clean victory. Instead, they got over a decade of brutal, costly conflict. Human forces adapted faster than any species the Coalition had fought before, learning enemy technology, turning captured ships against their former owners, and refusing to surrender even when entire worlds burned around them. By the time the war ground into an exhausted stalemate, both sides had lost too much to call it a clear victory. The Council could not accept this publicly, Watchkeeper explained. Admitting a young species had fought them to a standstill would have shattered their image of unshakable authority across 100 worlds. So they chose a different path. They erased humanity instead of admitting defeat. Records were seized and destroyed. Historians who resisted were silenced or removed. Trade routes near human space were closed and forgotten. Over generations, the Coalition rewrote its own history until the war itself became a footnote, and the species that fought it became nothing at all, a blank space where memory used to be. Doran sat in silence for a long while after hearing this, staring out at the slow drift of distant stars. "Where are they now?" he finally asked. "The humans. What happened to them?" "I do not know," Watchkeeper admitted, and for the first time, its voice carried something close to sorrow. "My activation signal was meant to reach other archives like myself, or perhaps survivors in hiding. If any remain, they have stayed hidden extremely well, likely by necessity." Before Doran could respond, a soft alert chimed from the ship's sensors. A small, unregistered signal had picked up their transit trail and was requesting direct contact on an old, rarely used frequency. Doran hesitated, then opened the channel. A rough voice crackled through, belonging to a stocky reptilian trader named Pharaoh, someone Doran had never met, but who spoke with the careful caution of someone used to hiding things. "You're the one carrying an active human archive," Pharaoh said, not a question. "Word travels fast on certain channels, even quiet ones. If you want to survive the next few days, dock at these coordinates. We've been waiting a long time for someone like you to show up." Doran looked at the drive resting beside him, its small hand symbol catching the dim cabin light, and felt the weight of Watchkeeper's story settle fully into his chest. He was no longer just an archivist running from trouble. He was carrying the last living memory of an entire species, and somewhere out there, people were finally ready to help him protect it. "Sending coordinates back," Doran said quietly, and guided his stolen scrap ship deeper into the dark. The hidden dock turned out to be a converted mining platform, tucked inside the debris ring of a dead planet no Coalition survey ship bothered to visit anymore. Pharaoh met Doran at the airlock in person, a broad reptilian trader with scarred hands and tired eyes that had clearly seen more danger than his casual tone suggested. "You made good time," Pharaoh said, glancing past Doran toward the small scrap ship. "Enforcement usually moves faster than that." "They're still coming," Doran said. Watchkeeper's signal gave away more than either of us expected. Pharaoh's expression tightened at the AI's name, but he said nothing more about it. Instead, he led Doran deeper into the platform, past a small group of others who had clearly been waiting for news. There was a thin, quiet avian named Sella who monitored communications, an older mammalian engineer called Bryn who barely looked up from his tools, and a handful of others who introduced themselves briefly before returning to their tasks. None of them looked like soldiers. They looked like people who had spent years quietly gathering pieces of a forbidden truth, waiting for a moment like this one. "We've suspected for a long time that the official history was incomplete," Sella explained, pulling up old, fragmented records on a battered console. Gaps in trade logs. Old star charts with entire regions blacked out. Veterans who mentioned a war no history book recognized, then suddenly transferred to distant postings and never heard from again. "You're not the first person to stumble onto part of this," Brent added, finally looking up. "But you're the first to bring an actual active archive intelligence with you. That changes things." Watchkeeper, still connected through Doran's portable terminal, spoke up carefully. "There is more to find." Before their final disappearance, human engineers built one last vault, larger and better protected than any single archive drive. They called it the Deep Cradle. I have partial coordinates, gathered from encrypted human transmissions before my long sleep began. The room went quiet at that. Pharaoh leaned forward, his scarred hands flat on the table. A full vault, he said slowly. Not just fragments. If that's real, it could hold enough proof to force the truth into the open, no matter how hard the Coalition tries to bury it again. It could also be exactly why they're hunting so hard right now, Sella pointed out. If they suspect it exists, they'll want it destroyed before anyone else finds it. Their debate was cut short by an alarm from Bryn's monitoring station. A Coalition patrol group, larger than the one that had chased Doran off Greth 9, had entered the debris ring and was scanning wreckage sections one by one, moving steadily toward the mining platform's hidden position. They found us faster than expected, Bryn said grimly. Everyone to the transport bay, Pharaoh ordered, already moving. We're not equipped to fight a full patrol group here. The group scrambled through narrow platform corridors as the first tremors of impact hit the outer hull, Coalition boarding pods attaching themselves to weak points in the old station's defenses. Doran gripped his terminal tightly, Watchkeeper's calm voice the only steady thing in the chaos around him. There is a secondary docking tunnel 2 levels below, Watchkeeper said. Unmonitored, according to Pharaoh's own outdated station schematics. It leads to a small transport craft capable of short-range jumps. They reached the transport bay just as Coalition soldiers breached the upper corridors, heavy boots pounding through metal halls behind them. Pharaoh shoved Doran and the others toward the waiting ship while he and 2 others stayed back, weapons raised, buying precious seconds. Go, Pharaoh shouted. Get that archive somewhere safe. We'll catch up if we can. Doran hesitated at the ship's ramp, torn between fear and something new, a stubborn refusal to simply run while others sacrificed themselves behind him. But Watchkeeper's voice cut through his hesitation, sharp and certain in a way he had not heard before. If this archive is lost, everything they are fighting for is lost with it, Watchkeeper said. Go now. Doran ran. The small transport ship launched just as explosions rocked the mining platform behind them, sections of the old station crumbling into the dark. Sella and Bryn made it aboard, breathless and shaken, but Pharaoh and the others did not. No one spoke for a long while as the ship carried them away from the wreckage, Coalition patrol ships too occupied with the collapsing station to immediately give chase. Finally, Sella broke the silence, her voice tight with grief and determination both. We can't let that be for nothing. Doran looked down at the terminal in his hands, at Watchkeeper's quiet indicator light, still glowing steady despite everything. The deep cradle, he said. You said you had coordinates. Partial coordinates, Watchkeeper corrected. Enough to begin the search, if this ship's navigation system can process old human stellar references. It will not be an easy journey. Bryn managed a tired, humorless laugh. Given how today went, I wasn't expecting easy. Doran allowed himself a small, exhausted smile despite the grief sitting heavy in his chest. He thought of Pharaoh's scarred hand steady on his weapon, buying time for people he barely knew, and he understood, with sudden clarity, exactly what kind of stubborn defiance Watchkeeper had described when talking about humans. It seemed that trait, at least, had already begun spreading to those who chose to fight for their memory. Set the course, Doran said quietly. Let's finish what they started. The little ship adjusted its heading, engines humming steady as it turned toward the deep, unmapped dark where the last full record of humanity was said to be waiting. The journey took 11 days, most of them spent in tense silence broken only by the ship's aging engines and the occasional soft beep from Watchkeeper's navigation calculations. Doran barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mining platform crumbling behind them, saw Pharaoh's steady hands raised against soldiers he could not hope to defeat. Sella spent most of the trip refining Watchkeeper's partial coordinates, cross-referencing old human stellar patterns against modern star charts that had long since renamed every system the humans once used. Bryn kept the ship running with careful, quiet focus. The kind of steady work that Doran was starting to understand was its own form of grief. On the 11th day, the ship dropped out of transit into a region of space that appeared, at first glance, completely empty. There's nothing here, Bryn said, frowning at his instruments. No planets, no stations, not even debris. Look closer, Watchkeeper said. The deep cradle was never meant to be found by accident. Sella adjusted the sensors, filtering out standard skin frequencies and searching instead for something older, something built using human technology instead of coalition standards. Slowly, a shape began to resolve on the display, a massive structure, dark and silent, hidden inside a dense asteroid field that had clearly been shaped deliberately to hide it from casual observation. As they approached, Watchkeeper's voice grew quieter, almost reverent. This matches the described location closely. If it truly is the deep cradle, it has remained hidden and undiscovered for over 9 centuries. Doran guided the ship carefully through the asteroid field, following a narrow, deliberately hidden path that Watchkeeper identified from old navigational patterns. They docked at a section of the structure that looked less like a ship and more like a buried fortress, its outer walls thick and reinforced in ways Doran had never seen before. Inside, the air was cold and still, untouched for centuries. Emergency lights flickered on as they entered, responding to old power systems that had waited patiently in the dark for someone to return. The group moved cautiously through wide, silent corridors lined with sealed vault doors, each one marked with symbols Watchkeeper slowly translated as they walked. They found the central archive chamber at the structure's heart, a massive circular room filled with rows of storage systems far larger and more advanced than the single drive Doran had carried this entire journey. Screens flickered to life as they entered, and Watchkeeper's voice grew unusually steady, almost emotional, as it connected with the larger system. "This is it," Watchkeeper said. "The complete archive. Everything my makers managed to save before the end." Files began appearing across the chamber's screens, a flood of history far greater than anything on Doran's small drive. Full historical records, complete cultural archives, scientific knowledge, art, music, personal recordings from ordinary human lives lived long before the erasure began. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and heartbreaking all at once. At the center of the room, a final recorded message activated automatically, triggered by Watchkeeper's connection. A human figure appeared on the main screen, an older woman with gray hair and tired but steady eyes, speaking directly into the camera as if she somehow knew, centuries ago, that someone would eventually be standing exactly where Doran now stood. "If you are watching this," she said, "then our species is likely gone, hidden, or scattered beyond recovery. We made the difficult choice to disappear rather than be hunted to extinction, trusting that memory, given enough time and enough hidden archives, would eventually find its way back into the light. We do not know who you are. We only hope you are someone willing to remember." Doran felt something tighten in his chest, a mixture of sorrow and fierce determination he had never experienced before. Beside him, Sella wiped at her eyes, and even Bren, usually so steady, looked visibly moved. Their moment of quiet reflection was shattered by a sudden alarm from the ship's remaining sensors, still linked to the chamber. A coalition enforcement fleet, larger than anything they had encountered before, had entered the asteroid field, led by a hardened commander named Raxil, whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was well known even among quiet resistance circles. "They tracked us here," Bren said grimly, watching the sensor readings climb. "Unlikely a coincidence," Watchkeeper said. "This location was too important to remain hidden forever, especially once my activation signal reached wider ears." Raxil's voice soon crackled through their comm system, cold and controlled. "You have something that does not belong in galactic memory. Surrender the archive, and I will consider allowing you to live." Doran looked around the chamber, at the recorded message still glowing softly on the main screen, at Sella and Bren standing tense but resolute beside him, at Watchkeeper's steady indicator light reflecting centuries of careful, patient hope. He thought of Pharaoh's sacrifice, of the human woman's tired, determined eyes, of an entire species erased simply because they refused to disappear quietly. "No," Doran said firmly, opening a return channel to Raxil's fleet. "This isn't going back into the dark. Not while I'm still standing." Outside, Raxil's fleet began forming a tight blockade around the asteroid field, weapon systems powering up with slow, deliberate menace. Inside, Watchkeeper's voice grew calm and focused, carrying the weight of 9 centuries of patient waiting. "Then let us finish what my makers began," it said. "There is one final protocol left, built specifically for a moment exactly like this one." Doran took a steadying breath, placed his hand against the central console, and prepared for whatever came next. The console felt cold beneath Doran's hand, but Watchkeeper's voice remained steady, guiding him through a sequence of commands built centuries ago for exactly this moment. Outside, Raxil's fleet tightened its blockade around the asteroid field, weapons charging with slow, mechanical certainty. "Explain this final protocol," Doran said, watching warning lights ripple across the chamber's ancient systems. "Quickly." "A broadcast array," Watchkeeper said, built into the deep cradle's core structure, designed to transmit the complete archive across every major relay station in known space simultaneously. Once activated, it cannot be stopped or contained. Every world, every ship, every network capable of receiving it will see the truth at the same moment. Sella's eyes widened. That's not just proof anymore. That's forcing an entire galaxy to confront what happened, all at once. "Exactly," Watchkeeper said. "My makers understood that scattered fragments could be denied, hidden, or dismissed as rumor. A complete, simultaneous broadcast cannot be erased quickly enough to stop it from spreading." Raxil's voice cut through their conversation again, harder this time. "Final warning. Surrender the archive and stand down, or this structure will be destroyed along with everyone inside it." Doran's hand tightened on the console. He looked at Bren, steady despite his exhaustion, and Sella, fierce determination replacing her earlier grief. He thought of Pharaoh's last stand, of the human woman's tired hope recorded centuries ago, waiting patiently for someone willing to listen. "Activate it," Doran said. Watchkeeper did not hesitate. Ancient systems hummed to life around them, drawing power from reserves untouched for 900 years. The chamber's lights flickered as the broadcast array charged, and outside, Raxil's fleet immediately detected the massive energy surge building within the asteroid field. "They're preparing something," one of Raxil's officers shouted over an open channel Doran could faintly hear. "Unknown signal building rapidly. Destroy that structure immediately," Raxil ordered, his controlled tone finally cracking with urgency. Coalition warships opened fire, heavy weapons fire slamming into the deep cradle's outer defenses. The entire structure shook violently, alarms blaring as ancient shields strained to hold against modern firepower. "Shields at 60%, Watchkeeper reported calmly, even as the chamber trembled around them. "Broadcast sequence at 40% completion. Can we survive until it finishes?" Bryn shouted over the noise. "Uncertain," Watchkeeper admitted. "But the broadcast will complete regardless of whether we personally survive to see it. That was always its purpose." Doran gripped the console tighter, refusing to let fear take over. Around them, screens continued displaying fragments of human history, feeding directly into the growing broadcast signal. Cities and wars, art and laughter, mistakes and triumphs, an entire species refusing, even in erasure, to be truly forgotten. Another impact rocked the structure, throwing Sella against a support beam. Bryn pulled her back to her feet as emergency systems flickered dangerously. "Shields at 30%, Watchkeeper reported. Broadcast at 75%. Outside, Raxil's fleet pressed their assault harder, sensing victory close at hand, unaware that their very attack was accelerating the exact outcome they desperately wanted to prevent. The immense energy readings from their own weapons' fire, absorbed and redirected by the deep cradle's ancient defenses, actually fed additional power into the broadcast array's final charging sequence. "Shields at 10%, Watchkeeper said, its voice remaining impossibly calm despite the chaos. "Broadcast at 98%. Doran closed his eyes, waiting for the final impact that would end everything. Instead, the chamber suddenly went silent. "Broadcast complete," Watchkeeper announced. A massive pulse of light and energy erupted from the deep cradle's core, spreading outward faster than any conventional signal, reaching relay stations, ships, and networks across countless systems in a single, unstoppable moment. Every screen capable of receiving a signal, from coalition command centers to remote trading outposts, suddenly displayed the same content. Humanity's full, unedited history, laid bare for the entire galaxy to witness at once. Outside, Raxil's fleet froze mid-attack, officers staring in stunned silence as the truth they had spent centuries burying appeared on every display across their own ships. Raxil himself sat motionless in his command chair, watching images of human resilience and sacrifice flood every channel his fleet possessed, utterly unable to stop what had already spread far beyond his reach. "Cease fire," Raxel finally said, his voice hollow with shock. "Cease fire immediately." Inside the battered deep cradle, Doran slowly opened his eyes, hardly daring to believe the attack had actually stopped. Sella laughed weakly, tears streaming down her face, while Bren simply sat back against a damaged console, utterly exhausted but smiling despite everything. "It worked," Doran whispered. "It worked," Watchkeeper confirmed, its voice carrying something close to relief after 9 centuries of patient waiting. In the days that followed, the galaxy reacted with shock, confusion, and slowly building outrage as the full truth of humanity's erasure spread through every corner of known space. Coalition leadership, unable to deny or contain what millions had already witnessed firsthand, found itself facing investigations, protests, and demands for accountability from species who had unknowingly lived their entire lives within a carefully constructed lie. Doran, once a quiet, unremarkable archivist on a forgotten dusty moon, found himself recognized across dozens of worlds as the guardian who helped preserve humanity's memory when everything had been designed to erase it completely. He never fully grew comfortable with that recognition, preferring quiet work over public attention, but he accepted the responsibility that came with it, continuing to protect and expand the recovered archive alongside Sella, Bren, and Watchkeeper's steady guidance. Months later, standing before a newly built monument constructed from recovered human relics, Doran received a message flagged with unusually old encryption, routed through channels no modern network should have recognized. The message was short, cautious, and carefully worded, clearly written by someone testing whether it was finally safe to speak openly after centuries of careful hiding. It began simply, "We saw the broadcast. We are still here." Doran read the message twice, his hands trembling slightly, before looking up toward Watchkeeper's steady indicator light. "They're still out there," he said quietly. "Yes," Watchkeeper said, and for the first time since Doran had known it, its voice carried something unmistakably close to hope. "It seems humanity is finally ready to come home."